Good morning, everyone. I hope you're really well this morning. Apologies for anyone who, or to anyone who was watching the first video. My Wi Fi cut off and the video froze. So let's go again. So, in this video, we are looking at early versus late eating and how that affects our weight and our health markers, including cholesterol and triglycerides. This video goes hand in hand with the video I did a few days ago on breakfast versus dinner and which is better, bigger breakfast or small. So you'll see a lot of the information in here corroborates and the research corroborates what I did in that video. So again, apologies for anyone who was watching the first recording of this. My Wi-Fi and technology just doesn't like me this week. So anyway, let's go on. So this is an age-old question, well, almost age-old. Which is better for weight loss, eating my food earlier or late in the day? And today we're looking at the research behind timing of meals, which I think is very important and I've always practiced with my clients. And we're looking at how it affects weight and those health markers, including insulin resistance and cholesterol and triglycerides. So, the first study that we're going to take a look at, and all this research will be put down in the description. So, the first one is prolonged controlled daytime versus delayed eating impacts weight and metabolism. And that is in current biology. And what we found in this study, the researchers split participants into two groups. They gave them standardized meals and snacks, and one group consumed their food in an early feeding window. So that was 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is still pretty late, in my opinion. And the other group consumed their food in a feeding window of noon to 11 p.m., which is insane. You shouldn't be eating that late in the day. But however, the researchers wanted to see how that early eating in the day versus the late in the day eating, especially when you're eating the exact same food, how can that affect your health and your weight? So, the early feeding window group, they lost 2.5 pounds over 8 weeks, which doesn't sound like a lot. This study was not specifically designed for weight loss. It was designed to keep them at the same calories and macros, but see how that altered their weight without trying to lose weight. So again, the early feeding window group, they lost 2.5 pounds over 8 weeks. And the group that had the same food but ate it later in the day, they gained half a pound. So there was a 3 pound benefit for the early feeding window group just by eating earlier in the day. Also, these meals were standardized. They weren't specifically trying to lose weight. And standardize, it means that they had the same meals, the same calories, the same macros. They also found that the group that ate earlier in the day also had better cholesterol and insulin sensitivity. In another longitudinal study titled An Earlier First Meal, Timing Associates with Weight Loss Effectiveness in a 12-week weight loss support program. So these guys were specifically looking for weight loss, and they found that eating an earlier window or eating earlier in the day predicted more weight loss over the course of a 12-week intervention. They found that people who ate at 7 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. lost 3.5 pounds more over 12 weeks just by eating an hour earlier. What could be going on here? Well, the thyroid and metabolism and metabolic hormones are going to be playing a big part in this. Thyroid does need support earlier in the morning. Your thyroid is your control system for your metabolism. So, eating earlier in the day, especially if you have thyroid issues or feel like your metabolism is slow, that's going to be the smart approach. And that's contrary to what a lot of people think now, especially with all the kind of talk around intermittent fasting and the ketogenic lifestyle over the years. And, I've even been one where at one stage I was recommending people push for a later feeding window, but I had reversed that a couple of years ago, and I've posted lots of research on that in my Facebook biohacking group and on my other content. So they had, just by eating an hour earlier, they lost more weight, which is crazy. There was another study titled "The Effects of Feeding and Schedule Changes on the Circadian Phase of the Cardiac Autonomic Nervous System." So, your central nervous system, and serum lipid levels, which would be your triglycerides, your cholesterol. And what they found in this one was that people who ate earlier, they have lower cholesterol as well as lower triglycerides. Again, what is the mechanism here? Well, the thyroid's going to be playing a part there, and metabolism. We know that our metabolism runs faster or higher earlier in the day. As the day goes on, the hormone shift does affect our metabolism. Combine that with fatigue and inflammation from the day's stressors and wear and tear. As the day goes on, we also know that we are more insulin resistant, and that's going to all have a direct effect on cholesterol and triglycerides, especially when you're looking at the inflammation and the stress that directly will influence cholesterol. Regardless of nutrition, that's going to impact cholesterol. So then there was another randomized control study, and a randomized control study is like the gold standard for studies. And this one was titled, and it was in the International Journal of Obesity, so pretty reputable journal. This one was titled "Meal Timing Affects Glucose Tolerance, Substrate Oxidation, and Circadian Related Variables, a randomized crossover trial." And what they found in this one, they had split participants into two groups again, which is the usual, and both were given the same standardized meals, so the same macros, the same calories. This study was more focused on lunch. The first group had lunch at 1 p.m. and the second group had lunch at 4:30 p.m., which is usually when I'm finished my dinner. The study found that after just 2 weeks, people who ate a later lunch had a 45% increase in blood glucose levels. Again, this goes back to what we know about insulin resistance increasing as the day goes on. They also found that people who ate a late lunch also had decreased energy expenditure because our metabolism slows down as the day goes on, and had a decrease in the thermic effect of food. So the thermic effect of food, like I mentioned in the video on breakfast versus big breakfast versus small breakfast the other day, the thermic effect of food is basically how much energy you burn processing and digesting your meal. So protein, we know, has a high effect on our thermogenesis, whereas fat almost has no effect. Protein has a 30% effect. So that would be a good example would be protein. Protein, a steak, like a lean steak, is very hard to digest. So you end up burning 30% of those calories just digesting and processing the steak. So let's say that steak, for example, is 200 calories. By the time that steak is digested, you maybe, with the consideration of thermogenesis, um, you maybe are getting 160, 170 calories out of that steak. So that's the thermic effect of food. So eating later in the day, people have a lower thermic effect of food, which is why it's smart to have a higher protein meal at the end of the day and more fiber, stuff that's harder to digest, so you can specifically influence that thermic effect of food and your metabolism. So there was then another longitudinal study, and this study was titled "Timing of Food Intake Predicts Weight Loss Effectiveness." And these are all super studies. And this one found that over 20-week weight loss intervention, people who ate lunch before 3 o'clock lost 5 pounds more than people who ate lunch after 3 o'clock. Then there was another study, and there, like I said, there's like loads of research on this. This is going back years and years of eating earlier in the day versus eating later in the day, and how that influences not just our weight but our health biomarkers, which are very important, as many of us know. But this one, titled "Breakfast Skipping and Timing of Lunch and Dinner." A lot of people skip breakfast, and its relationship with body mass index, so BMI, and obesity. And this one, we found that this was more correlational, but it found that people who ate lunch after 12:30 p.m. are more likely to be obese. They also found that for every 1 hour delay in the time at which someone eats lunch, there is a zero point 0.5 increase in BMI on average. So basically, eating lunch later predicts a higher body mass index and a greater chance of obesity. Okay, so then what these studies are basically telling us is that having that earlier feeding window or eating your meals earlier in the day is definitely better for weight loss and health. People lose much more weight when they have breakfast and lunch earlier. They have better insulin sensitivity, they've better blood glucose, they've better cholesterol and triglycerides. Again, what's the mechanism here? Where does dinner play a part? Well, first, the mechanism is going to be very much hormonal related. Hormones change as the day goes on. Our hormones work on a 24-hour clock. Specifically, our thyroid hormones are more active earlier in the day, starting 5 a.m., 6 a.m. That's where our thyroid's starting to be more active, and having a meal early in the day is going to fuel the thyroid and the metabolism, and then that downstream effect on everything else, which also it goes back to, I don't know how many of you heard this, but it's always been known through the educational system as well, that people and students learn better earlier in the day, because that's when everything is functioning better, because the thyroid functions higher earlier in the day, and your thyroid directly influences your cognitive performance. And then as the day goes on and the hormones start to change, and we get the wear and tear of the day, and we're fatigued, and the stress has got to us, and now we've got a lot of inflammation, that then increases the insulin resistance, but it also slows down the metabolism. And we see that from the studies I've cited. This also, when we're looking at dinner, if someone is eating a later breakfast and lunch, they're generally going to be eating dinner later in the day, which we don't really want to do, because that's going to influence human growth hormone and deep sleep and fat burning capabilities. So you're if you're eating anything later, you're pushing back that last meal, and we don't really want that. Like, it, for instance, back to that study where they were having lunch at 4:30 p.m. Well, if you're having lunch at 4:30 p.m., you're probably not then having your dinner or supper till 8 or 9 p.m., which is crazy, and then you're going to bed at 10. So there is several considerations here, but what these studies tell us is that having that earlier meal timing is better for weight loss and health. And it also reminds us that if you're doing any sort of time restricted feeding, having that earlier feeding window is going to be more beneficial. There was one other study, and that was titled "Early Time Restricted Eating for Weight Loss, Fat Loss, and Cardiometabolic Health in Adults with Obesity." And in this one, what they found was they looked directly at the combination of a 6 hour feeding window. So you're only eating, let's say, between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m., so 6 hours, or noon and 6 p.m. And what they found, that in that 6 hour feeding window, when it was earlier in the day, let's say 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., they found that when participants ate from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It was actually, they looked at 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. They had improvements in ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone. So when ghrelin is not overly active, then you're not going to be encouraged to feel hungry or eat more or overeat. They also had higher leptin levels, leptin being our satiety hormone, but leptin is directly connected to body fat set point and rebound weight gain and fat burning. Ghrelin equally is associated with fat burning, but more so in relation to human growth hormone at nighttime, which is why I've always said it's okay to be a bit hungry when you go to bed at night. And they also found improved insulin resistance. If you're eating from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., you can bet your bottoms that your insulin resistance is going to be very, very much improved. Also, I know that eating earlier is not doable for some people with night shifts and fluctuations in schedules. So please just use this information the best way that you can. I don't want you to feel guilty about not being able to eat earlier in the day. I don't want to add on more stress to your day. That's not the intention. The intention of these videos is to educate people and help you understand your body and how we can alternate and tweak our days so that we can get the best, easiest results. So if you found this video or any of my videos or my podcasts helpful or interesting and you want me to continue making them, you can support me if you want, because they do take a lot of time, especially when the research has to be done and the studies have to be gathered. And I'm not monetized at all or sponsored. You can buy me a coffee. I'll share the link in the description. I really appreciate those of you who have already supported me. I do love coffee and it does fuel my brain. And thank you so much for your generosity. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to reading your comments. I really do read them and I try to respond to them as fast as I can. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Bye.